Welcome to press coverage. This is Theo Greminger. We're back. Another press coverage this week, guys. Had Davis Maddock on last week. This week it's August, so I'm dropping two. I have Abib Agbetoba today, and I have Scott Barrett on Friday. So this is really exciting for me. This is my first week I'm dropping two, but schedules permit, and when you get a chance to get really sharp, people on the show, you've got to do what you got to do, right, Abib?
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. Can't wait for that Scott Barrett episode. It was fun having him on the couch. That guy's got a lot of insight. I know he's dropping his annual article of his guys. So yeah, I mean, like you said, it's August. It's nut cutting time. It's time to get after it. Like all the days of the amazing values in the eighth round, those drying up a bit. So right now is really when you have to kind of lock things down to try and take advantage of some of these draft rooms.
So Abib is not the kind of guy that's going to hype himself, but we're sitting down here with one of the best players in the whole country, and you could say, oh, whatever, Abib wouldn't win my league. Yes, Abib would win your league, and Abib would do it pretty easily. Abib has won not one, but two of the FFPC Players Championships. So that little draft that the FFPC runs, it is sponsored by Fantasy Pros. Years ago, it was sponsored by Football Guys. And Abib took it down. I remember, Abib, how excited we were for you because we're in a lot of these group chats. We're grinding, we're getting after it, we're drafting a ton, and we were so excited for you. It was incredible. It was like our friend, and then you do it the following year. So Abib did it 2 years in a row. It's like at the end of the day, Abib, no matter what you do in fantasy, from here to eternity, you have back-to-back championships. It puts you right up there with the biggest names in fantasy. It was an incredible feat. And you definitely deserve all the props. You've earned them all. Why don't you talk about the thrill ride that was for you?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for me, it's always been about the process. I mean, you listen to kind of some of the guys that are around me, during those last, week 16, week 17, the money weeks. And honestly, I'm just sort of kind of just taking it as if it were week one, week two. And then you find out that you win it all. And absolutely, it's a surreal feeling, but it's almost like, all right, man, that's done. Let's get on to the next year. And it's really kind of, honestly, that's been my mindset with every single year. I think about the bad decisions that I made and some of the wrong start sits. One of those championships. I remember starting Benny Snell, and he put
you were a Benny Snell guy for a
I
while.
was a Benny Snell guy. Yeah, you got sometimes you got to admit your mistakes. And I remember starting Benny Snell in one of those money weeks, and he put up almost a goose egg. So I took that personal, and it's something that I jotted down, and something that I wrote down in my notes and refined, tried to incorporate and try to improve on, for years following. So, absolutely, obviously, the money's great, the notoriety is great. I think we all have a little bit, in us that want to prove that we're the best, fantasy minds, football minds, that we essentially know more than whoever we're competing against. I mean, and let's be real, that's why a lot of us are in it. And it's just, obviously a ton of fun, but it's also just very humbling. I mean, by no means do I think that luck didn't play some role in some of this. So definitely feel very fortunate and blessed to reach that mountaintop twice. So, but for me, my goals are always just kind of set on that next one, and that's really what I'm going after right now.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So I will say, the whole notion of, and I get into it with some people, whether it's around town or the people that talk about luck and fantasy, you have to get yourself in the situation where being fortunate matters. If you're a bad fantasy player, you can't luck your way into winning. If you're a very good fantasy player and you continually get yourself in positions to make some money, then you're going to have a couple of years where things bounce your way a little more than others. So I think it's a funny thing where it's kind of like saying, poker, there's a little bit of luck in poker. You draw, if I draw two aces and Abib draws two kings, I'm winning the hand, but it doesn't mean I'm always going to win the hand. And that's kind of the same thing in this game of ours. So a big hat tip. And I think the craziest story, not to dwell. I know you're a forward-thinking guy. You're thinking about this year. You don't want to talk about the years past, but the craziest story was, why don't you talk about the kicker situation in the first? You ended up having an interesting kicker situation.
Another lesson learned. I don't know how common, how if it was just commonplace to roster 2 kickers going into those final weeks, but I could be damn sure that it became very, very common and standard practice to make sure that, or at least consider the idea of rostering 2 kickers going into those final money weeks where rosters locked. Because I don't know if it was the first or the second, but there was one I distinctly remember. It was the Dallas Cowboys kicker, who was, I can't say that he was completely on shaky grounds, but definitely, like, once we entered into those tournament weeks and the waivers locked, he was on some real shaky grounds, and essentially just got cut. And I found myself without a kicker for 3 pivotal weeks. Again, fortunate enough to be able to overcome that. But it's not something I would recommend.
forever, you're a kickers don't matter guy. They don't matter. I leave my kicker spot open as an ode to Abib. Like, go ahead, come on, beat me with no kicker. So anyway, we're going to talk. Abib is actually drafting in 50 minutes. You're drafting in an FFPC main event, and I'm going to dive in, and we're going to talk a little bit of strategy about how we're approaching our FFPC mains. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hey, we're all starting new fantasy leagues all the time. And more often than not, where do we start our fantasy leagues at Player Profiler? On Sleeper. Because it's the best. You can imagine my excitement when I saw Sleeper rolled out. Sleeper picks, baby. Now, I love Kenny Pickett, right? Week 1, who does he face? San Francisco. That's a bummer. So I'm going to be going less than on Kenny Pickett's projected yardage and on whichever quarterback is starting for San Francisco in week 1. Probably not Trey Lance. But then, who do the Steelers face in week 2? The Browns, right? We think the Browns are going to crank things up. So there, you can say, hey, Kenny Pickett, more than his projected passing yards. And you keep on correlating. Elijah Moore, more than. George Pickens, more than. And if you pick up to 8, that's how you 100x your payout on Sleeper. It's called the Hail Mary. So if you use promo code Underworld, you get a $100 instant deposit match. Check out Sleeper's terms and conditions for details. These Sleeper picks are live in over 25 states. Yeah, buddy.
Welcome back to Press Coverage. On Press Coverage, we always want to talk about sharp takes, actionable information, and identifying edges. And tonight's guest is going to help us do so. Abib, one thing I want to ask you is, when you started playing high stakes, I know, we've communicated for years now, and we're not like some of the old guys. There's guys a lot older than us. Mm-hmm. Have you seen it now where it's getting a little more difficult in terms of edges and information, where you're able to get so much more information now than even, I think, 5 years ago, certainly, where you get so much beat reporter stuff coming in, fantasy analysts, it's a year-round thing now. You're getting bombarded with information. How do you filter things out? Like camp news, like, the constant drum beats. What are things you're looking for, like, that you're really kind of like circling and maybe think are positive for your process? And what are the things you're just like filtering out, and these are just nonsense things?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, things are just so readily accessible now. It is literally just a water hose, fire hose of information coming at us. And the industry is just a lot smarter. You got to give props to the all the drafters and all the people who are just diving into high stakes. Players are just smarter, so it's important, to try and find that edge. But kind of, I think, as you were alluding to a bit, I think there is some advantage in the fact that there is so much information to sift through, because now I think it's important to be able to critically appraise and find what is relevant versus what is misleading in many cases. And each situation is kind of unique. I think the first thing I try to do is start off with just a basis. I think, I made it a point this year to start earlier, almost immediately after the Super Bowl. I felt like the last year I really, waited until, fairly late, after OTAs, right before the training camp started. And I think it set me back a bit, or it was a part of the process I think I needed to redefine and redo. You, Deo, and others getting me into Dynasty, I think was just a major help. But immediately after the Super Bowl, immediately after the season ended, what I did is I went through and just created just a ton of notes. I got like 5 pages of notes, and some of those are just like very general notes. And then I go team by team with just things that I think are going to happen, or things that I need to look out for, or situations that I think are unclear, or situations that I feel very strongly in. And I don't want Twitter, social media, or even some of the beat writers to influence me too strongly on, unless there's enough data points to suggest otherwise. I mean, like I pulled up the notes because I knew we were going to talk draft strategy and potentially process, but 2023 notes. And this is no surprise. And the market's kind of gone along with some of these draft quality QBs. And this year we're seeing those quality QBs really come up the board. I like the idea of drafting as if all positions are flexes. Not the idea of wide receiver and running back, because what we saw was this major shift. All the wide receivers got pushed up and all the running backs got pushed down. So I really, throughout my process, I think if I can kind of nail one thing that's been different than years prior, is that I'm no longer seeing wide receiver and running back to some degree. And we'll I guess we can talk about that a little bit. Draft elite wide receivers aggressively. So I have that small tier of elite wide receivers that I'm just drafting aggressively. And then I got just a number of other things as well. So I start off with that, and that's my basis. And because I've been doing this literally since the season started, and I've been following along Twitter, I've been following transactions and what teams are doing, where are they spending money, what are they doing as far as in the NFL draft, what do the rookies look like, who's new on the team, what changes have been made, new head coaches, new offensive coordinators, new defensive coordinators, new offensive line coordinators, potentially bringing in new running schemes. All those things I think are so much more important than all the news we're getting just thrown at us right now. To me, all of that's so much important. I'll give you a kind of a low example. Hayden Hurst has been someone who's like, I've just been drafting like crazy. And I'm not by no means advocating go out and, move Hayden Hurst up your boards. But for me, he's been someone that I've looked at, as I was going through my team reviews, I looked at the Carolina Panthers. I looked at, the vacated targets. I looked at their personnel staff. I looked at the head coach that was coming in and the offensive scheme that he was bringing in. I looked at who they paid and how they paid him in the offseason. And then I looked at what they did in the draft. I looked at they have a non-mobile quarterback. And so for me, in my mind, I've just had Hayden Hurst being one of their top 2-3 target leaders, And so any information that kind of comes out, it needs to be a steady stream of data points for me to suggest otherwise. We're starting to see, a lot of news out about DJ Chark. He'll have a couple of good games. We obviously see some Jonathan Mingo hype. I think a lot of people have been kind of just on Adam Thielen, just being the guy that's going to lead them in targets. I mean, we're even seeing, what's his name? Blanking on it. He was traded from Jacksonville.
Oh no! Don't bring up Laviska Shenault.
Laviska
for another pod.
Exactly. If you search through the weeds, deep enough, you'll see a lot. You'll see quite a bit out there on, potentially Laviska. Actually, maybe this is the year. Who knows? But again, it doesn't matter what gets thrown out unless there's enough data points. It's going to be very hard for me to get off of the idea of Hayden Hurst potentially being a top 2-3, and then sure enough, I get something to confirm, my priors today where, it drops that now Hayden Hurst may be, the QB's number one, and who knows. But again, it's really the process that I try to keep, try to lock in on. what, where was I before all of this started? Because again, I don't know what beat writers are doing. I don't know how good they are, how good they not are. I'm sure there's some that are just excellent at what they do. There's some that have been in the industry for, long periods of time. Some of them have agendas, they can't go into the locker room and piss off players. So I think it's rare that you just see a beat writer just go at a player or put something out negative. Usually they're kind of, focusing in on the positive. Also, I don't know how much of them are really, just leaning towards being a mouthpiece for the organization or trying to work themselves up in a career, click, bait, things like that. So I'm just very, very cautious with what goes out. For the most part, I don't really care about any clips that I see, these spectacular catches and think like I just could care less unless a player is hurt, I'll kind of, watch closely. But for the most part, I got to say, like, I really haven't seen much in the way of just like reporting that's just really kind of taking me off someone or throwing me on someone. I'm sure it'll come because it'll be just, again, a collection of data points. But, for right now, I think it's, you just got to be careful if it's just kind of one isolated event.
Yeah, I love a lot of what you said. I think that with teams like Carolina, it's like whenever we have like an ambiguous situation where we're really, really searching for fantasy points, I think that always becomes something that people love focusing on, in August. But at the end of the day, that team is going to struggle to give us a lot, in my opinion, besides a couple of guys. So it might be a fruitless task. I love how you get locked on a guy like Hayden Hurst to be, because I think there's an argument to be made that what we think of guys right now is the best like that we're going to be. I feel like if we drafted the Vegas drafts today instead of drafting them when we do, I think we might be better drafters, because this next month is just wild. You
Absolutely.
get constant stuff. You get the preseason games. You get Kyle Pitts going over the top for a 50-yard reception and everybody goes nuts. So I feel like a lot of times what you think on August 1st is maybe more impactful than what you think on September 1st. There's some arguments to be made both ways on that, but I think that over the years, I try to stay pretty locked in. And I love what you said about looking at players as flexes. And I'll give you a hat tip for this. I think a lot of the great players that I've got a chance to talk to over the years are able to adjust their playing styles, their preferred playing styles, based on what's going to help them win. So I think it's very notable that Abib, you at heart are a running back drafter. Your preferred build, if it was a perfect world and ADP had adjusted and you knew guys were going to stay healthy, you would start the draft with 3 straight running backs. Probably. And potentially grab another one. But I think I've seen you over the years, go for wide receivers more and more increasingly. Do you think that your flexibility is you just looking for the ultimate edge, or do you think it's an indictment on the running back market where it's harder for you to find a 20-point per game scorer at that position than it might be the wide receiver position?
Yeah, and I think I got to preface this by saying again, like I really, lean on the idea of getting as many of the elite wide receivers, or what we consider the elite wide receivers. And that tier is actually very, very small for me. It goes from Justin Jefferson, probably if we're looking at ADP, through Devontae Adams, and the other guys are kind of in a lower tier. And I don't mind starting off, wide receiver, like grabbing Jalen Waddle, but he's just outside that tier. So if I can get those other guys in that tier, like 2 of those guys from that top wide receiver tier for me, I mean, I love that start, because like you said, running backs are being pushed down. I don't think it's just that they're devalued by the fantasy community. I think it's that they're devalued by the NFL. And not just from like a monetary standpoint, but from a usage standpoint. I talked about this idea that, or like that I'm getting, or the sense that I'm getting, that one reason why I'm looking at everyone as flexes is because I feel like there are way more teams that utilize 3 wide receivers. Okay. And I mean, utilize them in a sense that you can have 3 relevant draftable wide receivers that you can probably plug into the flex. There are more teams than ever using multiple running backs, whether it's just a true RBBC or they have specialized roles. And we even have some teams where we're drafting 2 tight ends. You know, I mean, what era have we ever been in where there's been 2 draftable tight ends on the same team? But the issue, I think, is the overall pie has not gotten larger. I don't think we're just, overall we're scoring way more fantasy points than we are. So now we have more players in the mix, meaning smaller pies. So to me, it's really important to try and, really get a good sense of, okay, how can I build a roster to really maximize each of my positional spots? My wide receiver 1, my wide receiver 2, my RB1, my RB2, my 2 flexes, or whatever the format is. And then that's kind of where I start. And the optimal approach to me is really getting one of those elite wide receivers to start off, because you're going to be hard pressed to find a wide receiver that's going to be able to potentially get you 300 points. And that's my benchmark. We all have, a handful of guys who we think could potentially break into that wide receiver 1 tier. And to me, I don't even consider it, you were a top 12 wide receiver. That's irrelevant to me. I mean, are you someone who's scoring 300 points? That's relevant to me. That's what a wide receiver 1 is. And sometimes in a given year, there may only be 5, whether or not you finish as a wide receiver, 10, 11, and 12 versus, and you gave us, 240 points, it's nice. But if you can get me 300 points, that's a difference maker. And I want as many of those guys as possible. And I think that's probably the hardest thing to find in a draft later on. So why not go with the knowns there? And then, of course, with running backs being pushed down the board, I feel like there's just a plethora of guys that could hit. You can get multiple where you don't even have to, you can keep some on the bench, and then you can play matchups. I think running back matchups against certain defenses are a lot easier to gauge and predict and project, making you, I think, a more accurate and successful fantasy player in redraft, where you're having to make these pivotal start-sit decisions. So, the focus this year for me has really been getting 2 of those wide receivers. We'll see if it hits. It feels uncomfortable, kind of fading guys like CMC and Eckler and even Bijan at times, because those guys can obviously just absolutely smash. But I'll trust the process and then kind of see where the chips fall.
Yeah, so those like, we'll call them like weapons of mass destruction wide receivers, because the guys that can put up a 30 spot for you, and you're walking in. Like, I started out a draft this week with in an FPC with Diggs and Lamb, and I'm like, it's boring. It's not like I'm going bold, but I'm going wide receiver, and I think I have 40 points up, at the start of the week. So I agree with you. I think it's the way to go about things. You have less and less running backs that are kind of like very safe. I want to just ask you about one guy. There's one player that is a little bit polarizing right now, and not that anybody dislikes him. I think everybody universally loves Nick Chubb, but there is some people looking at Nick Chubb as a potential hammer that can win fantasy this year and be a potential RB1 overall. We've never seen him do it. We've seen him reach like RB6 in points per game as like his ceiling. Where are you at on Chubb? Do you have a lot of Chubb? Because he's going right in that range where your weapons of mass destruction wide receivers are going. He's right around, by the time we were in Vegas, you're talking about top 15 Nick Chubb. Hands down, every draft.
Yeah, that's been the tough part. I think for some of us who volume draft, whether it's redraft or best ball, there's definitely this mind,
or both, Abib,
or both. Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to discriminate. Don't cancel me.
That's it. Abib doesn't respect you best ball drafters.
I love all you guys. I love all you guys.
There you go.
But I think that we have this mindset, we've been drafting since May, like some of us, that, because, we got a guy in the late second round, which is where I was getting Chubb, in all formats, late second round, just smashing it. It was such an easy click. And then, fast forward to August, now this guy's going to the first round, where it's like, well, I got him at value, so I can't draft him now. And to me, I try not to think like that. I don't really care where the guy's going. I've been pretty adamant this year that I think ADP is just, almost irrelevant in many ways. So if it wasn't for what we just discussed, as far as me trying to smash, those 2 high-end wide receivers, then I'd have a ton of Chubbs, and he'd probably be, definitely one of my higher owned running backs.
So I want to, and this is not just, hey, let's get Abib's takes on everybody when you've got 30 more drafts to go this month. But I do want to touch base on two players that I think are also polarizing, because you talk about where your teardrops lie in wide receiver. Then you also have two wide receivers going in the back end of the second round, Chris Olave and Devonta Smith, sort of in their own little mini tier. Do you think that this Chris Olave, where he's being priced, is an accurate reflection of how he'll return value this season? He's one of these guys that's kind of universally loved by every analyst and tons of people we compete with.
Yeah, he's been a tough one because he's not a player that I would typically go after, but I've 100% been going after him. I mean, I have him right after Jalen Waddle. I typically do go ahead, I'll take obviously the Chubbs, but then someone like a Derrick Henry over those two wide receivers. But then they're right there to follow. So I think I actually do have quite a bit of Olave. He's definitely someone I'm not letting pass towards the end of the second round. It's scary because I don't know what Michael Thomas is. I don't know if, his just voice, his presence, the ghost and the shadow of him, of his former self, is going to influence Carr in any way to, give him more targets than he should. The other guys, I'm honestly not as worried about. And so I think, when I've really kind of sat down and really locked in on it to try and project, which is probably not the wisest thing to do, but try to project what's going to happen over the course of the season. I mean, I find it very, very hard to think that, given how he looked entering into his second year, I mean, it's hard for me not to imagine that he's not that team's clear wide receiver one. This organization has been through years now of Michael Thomas not being able to stay healthy. I think it's just malpractice. And I'm not just saying that because I have the scrub.
You're a medical doctor too, baby.
Yeah,
so
not a lawyer though.
You don't throw around the word malpractice lightly.
Yeah, not a lawyer though. But yeah, but seriously, I think it's malpractice for this offensive coordinator and this coaching staff to not have him be the number one read in the offense. And if he's the number one read in the offense, I think he's going to smash value. I really do, because I don't have a lot of confidence in Derek Carr being able to kind of go through multiple progressions. And I think this is what the type of offense this is going to be. I think he's going to, really look for his first guy, maybe a split second on the second guy. And if it's not there, dump off, to the running back or to a tight end in the flat. And one reason why I'm just very, very high on Olave, to get back to your earlier question, is because the guy gets open. He gets open. And there were a lot of points left on the field last year. Andy Dalton was in decaf mode. I joke about it because that killed Kamara's value last year. He had zero interest in checking it down. But he also missed Olave on quite a few passes as well. So I'm hoping that their defense is not as good this year. They're in a very soft division. So one of my notes from early May was to stop looking at strength of schedules when it comes to defenses, even if it's broken down into slot corner, right and left corner, this and that, or same thing with running backs, and to really just start looking at point spreads. And I'm not a bettor. I don't really look at Vegas odds, but I can probably tell you that KC versus Lions week 1 is probably going to be one of the higher point spreads.
100%.
So yeah. So I like that idea of just really attacking teams that are going to have to put up a lot of points. So that's like maybe the one knock, given the division that he plays in and their playing style. I just hope that they're in, a few more shootouts, maybe a few more competitive games where they're having to put up points. But yeah, no, I love him where he's going.
I'll give you one teammate question, and it kind of ties into Devonta Smith. Who's a better value right now? AJ Brown, where you have to take him, let's call it 10, 11, 12, or Devonta Smith in the tail end of the second?
AJ Brown, and I don't say this strongly. I think they both kind of eat at each other. Now, again, we've all heard the arguments. Number one, it's a narrow target tree, so we'll see what happens with Swift. But even if you just add in Goddard, those three, having it be that narrow, that makes them potentially all viable high-end wide receiver 2/low-end wide receiver 1, potentially high-end wide receiver 1, and tight end 1. Like, he can. I'm very confident Hurts can support that. And we've heard the arguments that they've only been playing halves of games for the majority of the season, and maybe they have a much more competitive 2023 season that lies in front of them. So if they have to play an entire game, maybe that's more volume. But really, my kicker for preferring, and one reason why I own a lot more AJ Brown than Devonta Smith, is the idea that we just may see that insane TD season from AJ Brown, the Randy Moss season where he scores 20 TDs. Because I saw how they used him near the goal line, whether it was a bubble screen or RPO, slant route. They like that big body frame. So if teams are trying to take away Hurts at the goal line, and if Hurts is trying to maybe stay a little bit healthy, maybe we see a little bit more AJ Brown. It's not out of the realm of possibility to see him put up 15 plus TDs. And if he does, then, he's potentially the wide receiver 1 overall.
Yeah, I love that take. I'm big on AJ Brown in everything. Dynasty, redraft. I took AJ Brown with Amon-Ra St. Brown as a start in a main event that already went down. I love that take about the touchdowns, because you've seen AJ Brown have so many multiple touchdown games where that you could just see him do it on spike weeks alone and have 10 massive games, and that's what propels him if this offense is going to go nuclear. So I love it. I want to keep picking your brain on players, but first I want to kind of get into your process. So right now, if we draft an FFPC draft, like where Abib plays, and I play a lot over there as well, we get the draft order before these drafts go down. And then for some of us in these FFPC main events, Abib, you get your slots, it's great. You get it a month ahead. So those drafts are coming down the pipeline.
Yeah.
But tonight you're drafting out of the 4-hole.
Yep.
So you find out you're drafting out of the 4-hole. How do you start planning for this draft? Do you sit there and map out let's start from the top. Do you sit down and map out a top 4 and you have a plan no matter what's going to go down?
I try to, but honestly, it literally will come down to the last second, and it'll just be kind of a gut feel. I'm trying to do a better job of, diversifying, within my player pool.
Let's back it up. Have you had any top 4 picks in FFPC main events yet?
I have, and I've gone Chase at the 4 spot. So the question will be if Kelce falls. If Kelce falls, it'll be a question. It'll be a tough decision between Kelce and Tyreek Hill for me. Tyreek Hill, I could just easily see being the overall wide receiver 1, and I just love getting one of those wide receiver 1s early on in drafts. But Kelce, given what he did last year, is just truly amazing. Now I'm still worried. One of my off-season notes with the Chiefs was to not rely on 2023 Kelce numbers, because I knew and I felt that there was just going to be this theme that was going to spill over into 2023. And, we've had a lot of talk about Kelce as the overall, potential number 1 pick, and we've seen him there plenty of times throughout the offseason. And it's just odd to me that was not even in discussion last year or even the year before, and a lot of things can change. He just may not score as many touchdowns. You may see other guys carry a little bit more weight. And he's also getting older. And by no means do I want to fade Kelce at all. Obviously, he is the clear number 1, but I need to just not look at what he did in 2022. And I really want to take what he's done over the last 3 and 5 years and kind of use that average to bake in where I think he should go. So
I think there's an argument to be made that people are chasing a little bit of that edge he had versus tight end 2 more than what we're going to have, which I think could be a little bit incorrect, because I think there's some guys that could. I still think at the end of the day, if we all had to bet money on who finishes as tight end 1 overall, it's Kelce. Yeah. But is he 4 points ahead of somebody? Is he 3 points ahead? Because if you can start getting into that territory, then he's a little less impactful. So let's say you have your top 4, and it's Jefferson, Chase, Hill, and Kelce. McCaffrey's. Would you start considering McCaffrey at the 105?
No.
Okay, so we don't need to figure out where he's at for you. Just, are you still in on drafting Cooper Kupp where you would have been 6 weeks ago?
Yeah. You know, I'm a risky player in that sense. And you talked about, kind of, how do I plan for drafts? And really, I'm less kind of, worried about trying to plan out my entire team as far as, okay, I'm going to get a wide receiver here, then a running back here, and then or I'm going to start with a tight end build. So I need to, come back and get a wide receiver. Or if I get Kelce, then I want to try and stack. Really, when I'm going through the draft, I'm looking at, some controversial players, guys who are really rising up boards and guys who are really, really rising down boards. Some of the guys who are really, really rising down boards are falling for obvious reasons. You can look at the holdout running backs, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs. So what I have to ask myself and what I try to figure out before the draft is, where am I at? Where do I feel comfortable taking them? That way I'm not making that decision in the draft.
If you're OTC and Jonathan Taylor slides to the 3rd round, you have to take him, right?
3rd round, absolutely. And, I was in a main where all of this was kind of going on earlier, and he fell to the late 2nd. And at that point, at that time, I was like, he's fallen quite a bit. Let me take him. Knowing that he still could slide a little bit more. But yeah, even in the 3rd round, I'm taking him. Because like you said, like anything could happen. He either plays or he gets traded. We'll see what happens. But I think at that, given that talent, these are just risks that I'm willing to take. And if it doesn't pan out, it doesn't pan out. But I think these are the type of risks that could really get you, over the hump. 3rd round Josh Jacobs, mid to late 3rd round Josh Jacobs has been like one of my favorite picks. Maybe something that might bite me in the ass, but that's like that's definitely one of the major risks that I'm absolutely willing to take. So I try to figure out.
And I'll just say, Abib, like for your tolerance, like I think people listening to that, if you're dead on your 3rd round pick, that doesn't kill your build.
Nah.
Like if you draft well enough, you can't miss on 1, 2, 3. But if you miss on 3 and you hit well on your 1st and your 2nd rounder, and you'll able to extract value in 4 through 7, because a lot of our league winners, Abib, have been coming in that 4 through 7 range. I think it's a big misnomer that, like, playing it safe in the 3rd just feels like a very soft way to approach this game.
Absolutely. And there's like something to it. I mean, this kind of gets like into some of the nuances and, probably, thinking a little bit too far ahead. But the idea of like rostering like one of those early players who like either isn't playing for the first 3 to 4 weeks of a holdout or just a slow starter. Say one of the rookies we draft, or Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a good example. Doesn't start for like the first 2 to 3 weeks. If you're able to build a roster where you can sort of kind of manage those 2 to 3 week absences, I think what that does, it not only allows you to kind of have a player that could potentially be a home run hitter later on, but think about all the teams that did draft him that weren't able to manage, that did not have good roster constructions. So, well, now you just set yourself apart from the field. If you're able to lock in on one of those guys who's a slow starter where a good amount of teams who had him could not weather the storm, and all the teams that don't have him aren't taking advantage of this like, this potential, like, what should be a top 12 pick in 2024, you now have in the 3rd round, that could be something that could really propel you and be a differentiator come tournament time. Because now, Breece Hall, we don't see a healthy Breece Hall until week 4, but you're able to somehow manage to get your Breece Hall team to the tournament, and he's just hitting on all cylinders at that point. Well, I mean, you're probably going to be one of the lower-owned Breece Hall, a lower-owned team with Breece Hall on it that may set you apart from the pack. So,
yeah, and Abib's referencing FFPC style drafting, where if you get out of your league, to at least 2 teams are going to be competing for big money in these 3-week sprint. So it's a little different than our home leagues, but I do think Jonathan Taylor is one to monitor no matter where you're drafting, because this is a guy, Abib, that like 6 weeks ago was a 1-2 turn consideration guy. We drafted against one another in the hard way. You took him there. And I think it's definitely a super like risk. It's like a big litmus test for risk tolerance, for whether you view guys optimistically or pessimistically. It's really interesting to see the way sharp people are approaching Taylor, Jacobs, Hall, and it's all coming at us at once. Let's go back to, let's say you get Travis Kelce at the 4. How forced in are you to Patrick Mahomes when you take Kelce this year? And I'll say it with this. We're seeing 50% of the Travis Kelce drafters have also taken Mahomes. You're seeing that in FFPC numbers. God knows how many we're getting in Underdog and some of the FFPC competitors. But you're talking about something that makes you common, and it also makes you draft capital wise, you're spending like a ton of it. So are you more inclined to take Mahomes in the 3rd, or do you feel like I maybe want to force it in the 2nd just to make sure I have it?
I mean, honestly, to me, it's irrelevant. Like I have, and again, best ball, I get it to some degree. This is another riskier part of my game because I know what the data and the analytics state, and I know what the numbers say I should do. But to me, I just want to get the number 1 overall quarterback for the 2023 season. And right now, I don't have Patrick Mahomes as the number 1 overall quarterback. So my simplistic brain tries to ignore the idea of stacking. I like correlating to some degree, but it likes to, kind of ignore the idea of stacking and saying like, okay, if weeks 15, 16, and 17, Kelce goes off and Mahomes goes off, Mahomes could still be the overall QB3 that, throughout those 3 weeks. Or if you're in underdogs, he could be QB2, 3, and 4 over that span as far as, advancement rates. And Jalen Hurts could be the QB 1, 2, 1. So does it hurt me to I don't get the idea of not wanting to take, if I truly believe Jalen Hurts is a QB 1 overall, why would I go out of my way to take Mahomes? This is not even considering all the obvious reasons why, I want to avoid the idea of being like 50% of the Kelce owners, or the idea of like reaching on Mahomes in the 2nd round and passing on, seeing people pass over Derrick Henry and Chris Olave. Like, I don't want to pass over those guys for Patrick Mahomes when there are other quarterbacks.
Abib, you saw a Mahomes at the 1-2 turn in a main you did.
109, exactly. Yes.
That's wild.
Yes,
like you're seeing the enthusiasm is crazy right now. And I will give a hat tip to our friend Andrew Schellenberg of the GOAT District, who drafts against Abib and I, or with me sometimes. He had a Travis Kelce, Devonta Smith start, and he leaned into the Hurts as QB1. And I love that because I think Hurts gives you that elite ceiling, and a Hurts Kelce build is way less common. So you have the QB1 overall upside, the tight end 1 overall upside, and he still was able to build correlation with Devonta Smith. So I love that.
Man, so steal that tonight.
Yeah, go ahead and do it. Sorry, Andrew. All of America knows about your sneaky build.
I'll give you a percentage if I win it.
Yeah, give him a free drink voucher at the FFPC live draft, Abib. So let's say you don't take Travis Kelce. Let's say that you start tonight with another Chase or a Tyreek Hill. You're loving that start at the 104. Yeah. I love those guys, both in my top 3. Where do you start taking a look at tight end? Because you're going to miss on Mark Andrews. He's not going to be there for you at the end of the 2nd. So you're in kind of a sticky situation. There are value pockets for tight end right now in all forms of drafts, but especially in tight end premium formats like the FFPC. So you're not taking the 2nd round tight end. Where do you start, like maybe targeting guys?
It'll start probably in the 4th.
Okay.
I mean, I've just not been able to get Waller. I mean, he went in the 3rd round in the other league. I had an early pick similar to tonight, and he didn't make it back to me in the 4th. But I'd love to be able to get a Waller in the 4th round. If I don't get Waller, I may kick the ideas on a Pitts. We'll see. I'm really not there mentally with them. But sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah.
If I can see a path, I can see a path. Other than that, I'm really waiting till late. And I'll just try to go after a handful of guys and hopefully hit on one of the 4.
Yeah, I like that method. I think that's a great way of drafting. I'll say that like those low end tight end ones, like let's call it tight end 9 through 12, and the high end tight end 2s. So we'll call it like the 9 through 15 range. One of those guys is definitely going to hit this year, Abib, but I think historically that's been kind of a somewhat of a dead zone. So I like that approach. How about let's talk about quarterback a little bit, because quarterback, you talked about the need to find elite quarterback production. Is it a big 3 for you, or is it a big 4 with Lamar Jackson?
It's a big 4.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big 4.
Yeah, we're seeing that where it's the ADP, like for FFPC and a couple FFPC competitors have reflected on the fact that it is a big 4. Like you're seeing Lamar go ahead of Josh Allen. I'd say, what do we want to call it? 1 out of every 3 drafts, 1 out of every 4 drafts now, you're seeing that. And you're also seeing where Lamar Jackson is like tethered to the big 3, where once you see Mahomes go off the board or Hurts, then you usually see the next one goes pretty quickly. A couple picks later, it's usually Allen, and then Jackson right around there. So how about that Baltimore correlation play? You're not going to have exposure to it tonight, but could that be like the nuts this year to get Lamar Jackson with Mark Andrews?
Yeah, I love Lamar. I'm not 100% sure what that offense is going to look like from a distribution standpoint. You know, how many wide receivers are going to be involved, how many tight ends are going to be involved. I don't see them really utilizing the running backs all too much in the passing game, although it could happen a bit. What I really love about this offense, though, is the idea that they're going to kind of spread things out. And this is just going to allow, I think, Lamar to just have massive rushing lanes. And so I think we can see a regression in his TDs. As we've seen over the last few years, he's really not, put up the rushing TD numbers as we'd like. Obviously, a different type of body frame than Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. But this guy is definitely much more likely to break a 60-yard TD. And when you got, the defense having to worry about Zay Flowers and hopefully Rashad Bateman and OBJ and then Mark Andrews, I mean, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really, really tough. So I think you could easily see him, rush for over 1,000 yards. I actually have him over Mahomes, in my personal rankings. Mahomes is definitely the safer pick just from like an injury standpoint because he's not going to run as much, put himself, in danger as much. But I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to see Mahomes just have a little bit of regression in his TDs. Okay. And even just a little bit, I think is going to put him out of the running for number 1. Mahomes is not the number 1 overall points leader, for the last 5 years at quarterback. I think we somehow have this in the back of our, or think this as a baseline, and that's why he's just been the unquestioned number 1. But that's just not been the case. And I'd probably just encourage everyone to kind of just when you're sorting through these things, sort by points per game. To me, that's just much more effective. And you start realizing, oh, such and so, Hurts actually missed a game or two, or this player, had a game where he was knocked out, within the first couple plays of the game. And then things start to kind of make a little bit more sense as far as, oh, these guys are a lot closer than we thought.
So one area of quarterback runs that we're seeing, pretty regularly, especially in these higher stakes formats, is these quarterbacks that are like the right behind them, like the next ones up, where they're not quite the big 4, but they're all very desired players. Have you been diving into the range? And you don't need to give us which one here, but the range of Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, Joe Burrow, that trio. Have you seen that as a range you want to dive into as part of your attack, or do you think that they don't quite give you the same edge as the big 4?
No, I really do like those guys. Even after the Burrow injury, I feel like this is potentially his career year. I think his offense is going to go completely through him. So I love Chase and Higgins. But I think we can see him have that Mahomes type year where he's thrown for 40 plus TDs. So I love Burrow where he goes. I love Fields where he goes. I like the idea of, again, seeing that potential Josh Allen type leap where now, you get the passing and the rushing together. He's got some weapons now. He's a year older, another year entering, second year into that offense now. So I think that that's a huge plus. And I love Herbert. I think, my Chargers note was, pass Eckler and go after the Chargers passing game. And this is before they had hired their OC and brought over Moore, because I just felt like they were going to fire Lombardi. And I felt like what they did last year, part of it was out of necessity. Obviously, Herbert was hurt a little bit. The wide receivers were banged up, but his ADOT being that low, with, that type of quarterback, I just thought was just, it was just mind boggling to me. So when they brought over Kellen Moore, to me, that was just all systems go. Now, that being said, earlier in the season, I was smashing all of these guys because I could take chances on, okay, I can get an Alexander Madison in the 8th round. Joe Mixon is falling to the 6th round. James Conner is falling to the 8th round. I mean. Yeah. So, I did it with the idea that, okay, I know I can build out a very comfortable starting roster going 8 rounds into a draft. Now it's a little bit harder. Now things are a little bit tighter. So until I kind of identify those guys, it's harder. And then, James Cook was one of those guys. And then unfortunately, all the news has come out. Now, now he's, been removed from the player pool of guys you can get late that can, really be day one starters for you. But yeah, I like all those guys. I've definitely, not been taking them as much. Probably the only guy that I don't really have much of, and I'm just, very skeptical of is I'd probably say Trevor Lawrence. I just rather go after Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. So let's say we get past Watson, and Watson has been kind of like I think like the buffer zone for like elite versus guys that we're into, but not quite as much. We've seen it from Deshaun Watson. We've seen you live in Houston. You've seen those elite seasons that he put up where he's impactful and can really change your week just based off a big Deshaun Watson performance. If you miss completely on those guys, Abib, in the past, you've been a guy who's doubled down on quarterback. Are you looking to double tap kind of like that intriguing range and, try to get into like the Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson, Dak Prescott tier? Or are you still comfortable with one of those guys as kind of like a single QB and then really wait for a backup?
Yeah, if I get one of the top tier guys, I almost never get a second backup.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe here or there, but for the most part, almost never. And then once we get past Watson, I'm definitely double tapping, if not triple tapping, depending on like if there's value. I'm not as low on Dak Prescott as everybody is this year. I view him as a kind of a safe quarterback because I've just always had the mindset that there's no way that this offense is going to go through the ground as far as carries. They just don't have the personnel for it. It just doesn't make sense. And then you brought over Cooks. You have Gallup, who I'm very, very high on this year, coming off second year off the ACL. This offense is really just set up for me to go through the air. The only question is going to be pace, but I like that it's probably going to have to go through Dak, and he's got a lot to prove this year. So that's actually someone that I have not been scared to take as like, okay, the 12th QB off the board. But then I want to pair him with someone.
Yeah.
And that someone is like Tua, who I think has upside. AR, who I think has upside. It's odd that I feel like, the community just, is just not there on him. I haven't heard anything positive at all. I just continue to take him.
I took him the other day. Like it's talk about a guy that, if you don't necessarily have to use him first couple of weeks. And then as soon as he's ready to take over, you do that. And I think that's you can wait till the 10th round and double tap on two of these guys that Abib's referencing, and you're going to like your builds. We have talked so much, Abib, that we're 5 minutes away till game time. You're going to be drafting in literally 5 minutes. Yeah. So I have all these superlative questions. I wanted to get you like a quick hitter questions, but we're going to ask you one question that I've asked every single guest on press coverage. And we've been asking everybody on First Class Fantasy as well. Tell me a player that if you could know their final stats for this season, who would it be? One player that maybe gives you the most pause, that has the widest range of outcomes, or could potentially unlock teammates with his stat line, or be a guy you'd want to avoid. Who's the player that you really, really want to know how he finishes?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I'd probably say Calvin Ridley.
Okay. I love that one.
because, that offense historically, Peterson has never really just sort of kind of locked in on a wide receiver, to propel him to like a top 5 wide receiver. We talked about the 300+ guy. They also have a number of other different receiving options. I do think he'll lead that team in targets, but by how much so is what I'm not sure of. And I'm seeing him, go early third at times. I think I saw him go. Actually, I think in the main, I think he went in the back into the second.
I saw 212.
I don't know if that's wrong.
I saw 212. Yeah.
I don't know if that's wrong. I don't know if it's right. I haven't been that risky because I just have not felt very, very comfortable, and that could end up being a mistake. So that's a guy I'd like to be able to take a peek at end of year stats and see, was I right? Was I wrong? Do I need to level up and get some more shares?
I love it. I love the Ridley answer. My answer has been Deshaun Watson for a while because we're pushing Browns up so much. And if I know Deshaun Watson's back to being, 3 years ago Deshaun Watson, then I'll just wait and take Deshaun Watson. So it's like there's been some fantastic answers. You're the first person who said Calvin Ridley, but I do think it's super interesting. Like Mike Leone sat down with Billy and I, and he said, like, there's a universe where we're taking Calvin Ridley in the first round next year if he comes back and is Trevor Lawrence's guy and just goes nuts. Abib, let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find me at Skywalker 2000. That's SKYWALKA 2000 on Twitter. Happy to answer any questions depending on what time of year it is. But thanks for having me. This is always a great time with Theo. And just shout out to Theo. I mean, I've not seen somebody put in the amount of work and effort one man has done over the course of an off season. I mean, I honestly don't know how you look the way you do.
I'm balancing. It's balanced. I stay healthy. I stay healthy.
Dude, you are absolutely killing it. I mean, I'm just wishing nothing but the best for you. I think you just got such a bright future ahead of you. So just don't forget us little folks when you reach the promised land.
I can never, you're a daily DM for me, Doc.
Yeah,
so anyway, I want to thank Abib. This was a lot of fun. If you enjoyed my conversation with Abib tonight, please check out First Class Fantasy from last week with Nelson Sousa and Billy Muzio. Nelson Sousa, like Abib, is one of the best high-stakes players around, and you're going to love GOAT District on Wednesday evening right here on Player Profiler YouTube. Chris Ficarro and Billy Wazowski, both NFFC Hall of Famers, tremendous players, great minds. We're really trying to do what we can to help you win your leagues here at Player Profiler. Stick with us all summer. Abib, I hope you finish second in the main event tonight because I think I'm going to finish first with my Bijan Robinson team. But anyway, this was a blast. Everyone enjoy the rest of your night, or excuse me, enjoy your day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.